showing a good petaloid appearance of the macula, which is indicative of CME. So as usual, as a retinal surgeon worth his salt, we started the patient on Avastin. So this is the first injection, then second, then third, then fourth. After the fourth, we see a little bit of flattening of the macula. Till that time, we did not get any result over here. So at this time, we were still not very happy with the result that we got after the injections of Avastin. So we switched over to Tricort. So this is after the injection of Tricort. So I think this is one of the common situations that we face in a central vein occlusion, where we think that 1 or 2 injections should be enough, but patient has undergone 5 injections. So at this point, we could see that there is a lot of hard exudate starting to develop over here. So we thought the patient has had so many anti-VEGFs, we thought of switching over to a dexamethasone implant. So we gave one dexamethasone implant and the edema seems to have increased. So we thought we'll give some more of the injections. The patient is not very affording. So we switched back to Avastins for this patient. So in short, we have given about 9 injections, some of them steroids, some of them anti-VEGFs. And as we can see, the edema is not decreased, it has increased. So at this point, we can pause and have the opinions of our esteemed panelists as what we can do now for this patient. Dr. Anand?
So this case that you have presented appears like a recalcitrant CME that's not responding to Avastin as well as IVTA and with minimal response to Ozurdex as well. But we haven't tried some other anti-VEGFs. So one thing that I would like to try is either Eylea or Zaltrap in this case. I found that sometimes patients that are non-responsive to Avastin and Accentrix may respond to aflibercept. Any other? And sometimes you could also do a combination of an anti-VEGF and a steroid.
Yes. So I was going to come to that I think maybe I would have probably introduced a steroid earlier in this with a combination treatment and seen what would be the response. And yes, a second option would also be to switch to another anti-VEGF and not continue Avastin if I'm not getting the response, and definitely try. But also, Anand, this patient is a diabetic patient, right?
Yes.
Yes, and her systemic status was well controlled.
Systemic status was well controlled. And the other eye was not showing any features. That was no changes. No diabetic retinopathy.
No diabetic retinopathy. A lot of these cases, which I think over so many years of experience, you feel that these central large cysts that you see, in the initial presentation, a lot of times you don't see any response to that cyst only. Even if you give multiple anti-VEGFs, were you giving them at 1 monthly intervals from the beginning? Okay. Yes. Because a lot of people follow that at least they give a protocol of 6 injections in the first 6 months continuous, and you have such kind of edema. But I think probably a combination and you introducing the steroid earlier would have, maybe I don't know if it would have made a difference or not. I don't know what Anand.
I'd like to make another comment that in many of such patients I have been using yellow micropulse laser, and it helps me to get a response to the anti-VEGF, and what I have seen is that it also cuts down the number of injections.
So when would you introduce a laser in a case of macular edema with CRVO?
For cases that recur again and again, and for recalcitrant cases.
So there are a lot of guidelines when they say that a case is recalcitrant. So in the Western literature, they say you have to wait for about 6 injections before you can say that this is not responding.
Yes.
But in our scenario, I don't think we can wait for that long. I would say about 3 injections or so, then we can think about switching.
Yes.
Sure.
I think this might also be a good time to do a triple therapy, give both anti-VEGF and steroid whether you give implant or intravitreal tamsurin alone, and also can do laser, a pan-retinal photocoagulation if there is lot of capillary dropouts, especially in the periphery. That might be a good option to try all the three things together and see whether that increases the chance of resolving the edema.
You must have done an FFA, no, Anand, in this?
We had done the
For
FFA. I
sure.
showed
Yeah,
you this.
Didn't show any peripheral areas of non-perfusion or anything.
No, we started off as non-ischemic CRVO. So that is when with macular edema.
Yeah.
So that's what when we started off with the treatment of the macular edema. But during the course of the treatment, the vision gradually started falling down. So the patient was 618, I think, to start with, 624, gradually 660, and at present she is finger counting 1 meter or so. So like you all had discussed and suggested, what we did now was we gave an injection of zivaflibercept. So after that, we got a moderately good response from 1000 microns. It has gone to about 300 to 400 microns. There are still some cysts which are persisting, but at least this amount of edema is manageable as now. So with this, she's maintaining a vision of about 1.5 to 2 meters finger counting. So final response as far as anatomical success is pretty much okay as of now, but visually we are not very happy. So I think many of the CRVOs follow this pattern. So that's why I thought we should discuss this case, because starting off as non-ischemic CRVO, but over a period of time, it has now become a little bit like an ischemic CRVO, where the vision is not improving, macular edema is sort of in control, but now this patient is not going to recover 624 or better. So we come back to the original situation when we started off. So at that time, we should be more circumspect and explain to the patients that there is a risk that you might go into ischemic CRVO as well. Because many times when we see the patient with good vision, at that time we say, ha, injection low, everything is going to get, you will get better vision, you're going to improve. But we have seen that many of these patients do not improve. They go into, say, about 30% or so go into an ischemic CRVO over a period of time. So initially, our counseling should be in that manner that we should be little bit circumspect in that situation. So this is one condition where a retinologist would want to see the patient undilated before, so that we can see the new vessels of the iris if there are any. If they are there, then it's 100% confirmation it's an ischemic CRVO. So the rest of the ancillary tests I have enumerated over here. We have discussed these things. Is there any role of vitrectomy in these cases?
Personally, I don't think that vitrectomy works in recalcitrant CME secondary to RVO unless there is a frank epiretinal membrane or a vitreomacular traction. And even if there is, my results have not been. In fact, the CME still continues to remain recalcitrant even after vitrectomy and ILM peeling. So I would not recommend a vitrectomy in such cases. There are some questions about in the chat about role of carotid Doppler and in CRVO. So could anyone answer that?
I'll take that first, and you can add on if there are any more to that. So if an elderly, I think the criteria of elderly keeps on becoming more and more as we age. So initially I used to say 40 and above, we should not think of doing anything more. Now the criteria shifted to 60 and above. So if I get a patient who is 60 and above, then I would think of it as CRVO in an elderly and maybe do the baseline, blood pressure, diabetes. If any of these come positive, then I don't go much deeper into that. But if it is a younger patient, less than 60, and you have a CRVO, then you would like to rule out a little bit of the coagulopathies. If they are okay, then the lipids and maybe homocysteine. So that would be my basic criteria of the investigations. If it is a very young patient, less than 40, then we can think of the vasculopathies.
Anand, you did an FFA when the patient presented. Over a period of 3 months, did you repeat the angio? Did you think that you should have repeated an angio?
We didn't, but then after this patient has been with us for now 4 years. So we have repeated the FFA in between, but I've not had any more of the capillary non-perfusion areas increasing. Only the macular, that foveal avascular zone, which was distorted in the beginning, it's been like that.
Okay.
So how often do all of you do an FFA for a CRVO?
Sir, I'll add to that. A good time to discuss the newer technology like ultra wide field FFA or ultra wide field angiography as well as OCTA. So along with the same discussion.
Yeah, Octa would be good if in case you have facility for Octa, probably at least the area that you can see on the posterior pole, if you see areas of non-perfusion, probably a targeted laser which we normally are helping our patients with and not completely burning off the periphery. But I don't know how many of us have really been so successful in picking up images with Octa, because I still feel it's a difficult modality.
Can I, Swapnish, add a point in this? So, panel, can I add a point?
Go ahead,
Yes,
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in Octa, it is very important to remember low velocity artifacts. Sometimes the velocity of the blood in these ischemic CRVO patients is so low that the blood vessels appear completely pruned. It appears that there is a lot of capillary non-perfusion in the periphery. When you do a regular FFA instead of an Octa, you see these capillaries fill up, they were just slow to fill up. And because Octa has this huge problem with low flow artifacts, it's not the best modality of investigation for CRVOs.
But again, I think with Octa, what is going to happen is that as the technology advances, the cost comes down, the number of machines start increasing, it will definitely become much easier. Like in this case, how often can we go ahead and keep on repeating FFA? But if Octa is there, it will become much easier to keep on repeating the investigation and observing what is happening and compared to the previous Octa result. If we see definite sluggishness of the flow, then that would be an indication to guide us how to go ahead with a PRP or things like that.
Anyone would do a PRP based on capillary non-perfusion, or people would wait for NVI or NVA to appear before doing PRP?
In such a case where it is recalcitrant, I would definitely go ahead and do a PRP if there is capillary non-perfusion. Because what else do we have now? Options. Pros versus cons of doing a PRP. There is hardly any disadvantage compared to the possible benefit that at least we get some anatomical result.
So, Gaurav, I agree with you, but the audience should know that it will not help in reducing macular edema. It may help in preventing NVI and
agree.
But it will
I don't
not
think
really
that
help in
laser
doing
PRP helps in macular edema of CRVO in any way. But when I'm convinced that the CRVO is frankly ischemic, and even without NVI, I would go ahead and start a laser PRP, because I think it's quite effective in preventing NVI and NVG. A full scatter laser PRP, because once you end up with NVG, it's a Herculean task to prevent the patient from becoming no PL. What do you all think about it?
Also, would laser reduce the number of injections? Eventually, the patient
I don't think it would help in macular edema. It would probably not reduce, but it would reduce the risk of NVI and NVG. So
a central vein occlusion study which has been done, which they have said very clearly that PRP does not apparently help. Again, they use the word apparently.
So what would be your indication for doing a laser PRP for an ischemic CRVO? Because 50% of them would land up with an NVG. It's a very, very high percentage.
So the idea would be to have a close follow-up of these patients. So
have you had patients which that drop out of follow-up and come back with a neovascular glaucoma.
Yes.
How often does that happen? It happens all the time in my practice. So
Yes.
Problem is we don't have a straightforward answer for this. So because there is pro for this and there are cons for this.
correct.
Because many of them, some of them do come back even after we have done a PRP, they still come back with NVIs.
Correct. That could happen. Yeah. But I think the severity would be lesser.
Would be less.
So,
Just while we are on this topic, does anybody have any experience of radial optic neurotomy for ischemic CRVO? Any experience, personal experience?
no.
And
Okay. When I was at University of Florida, they were the people who had invented the Ron knife,
Mhm.
and they used to do a lot of radial optic neurotomy for ischemic CRVOs. But again, the results were extremely unpredictable, and that was in the pre-Avastin era. After Avastin came, all those what should I say, surgical gimmicks went away. So, if in such a case where even anti-VEGFs are not giving results,
Yeah.
it becomes a very tough situation. Even anatomical result is difficult to achieve, and there's nothing much what we can offer the patient.
If I'm not mistaken, in Bombay, I think we should ask Dr. Dudani. I think if I'm not wrong, I think he used to do, I think, this procedure. But
I have done 2 or 3 procedures of Ron, but again, the
Remember.
results cannot be guaranteed. With the Ron knife, which was there, which had a protective side towards the center of the optic nerve, the disadvantages weren't there. So risks were minified. But again, at the end of it, when we are answerable to the patient as to what happens to the vision part of it, I don't think that it was a really predictable surgery.
So what would one do? I mean, Anand, you got a good response to Zaltrap, right? And then did
good
you?
response for as far as the retinologist is concerned. As far as the
Not
patient is
obviously.
concerned, we have not had any good response.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the vision has deteriorated.
Yeah.
But if the edema does come back after this, would you still think of considering an injection, or at that point you would consider stopping?
We are still
Because it's
giving
very
the patient.
important.
Now the frequency of injection has gone down. So over a period of now 4 years, I think the disease has also died down a little bit.
Yes.
Along with that, now we are giving them this Zivaflibercept so that the number of injections has gone down and the response is pretty decent. So with 300 to 400 microns, this lady is maintaining this 1.5 meters.
Okay.
I think one of the important question which has come up, if neovascular glaucoma does come up in this patient, then what would one do? Would one do a vitrectomy plus endolaser? Anand
I would
Subramanian?
think NVI, we can take it as a stepwise fashion. If there is NVI without NVG, so we still have a good prognosis. If there is an NVG and your cornea is cloudy, then you have to go on the back step and start doing things in a, say, phase-wise manner. I would say NVI is an indication for anti-VEGF. I would initially give the patient an anti-VEGF, see how much the iris dilates. The iris is able to dilate fully, cornea is not steamy, then a good tight PRP. So that would be the management for NVI and NVG.
There are a lot of questions regarding drug of choice. So I think can we discuss dexamethasone implant as a single modality of treatment? When would the panelists use it? And also discuss various pathways of inflammation, because that should not be the take-home message that it's only a VEGF pathways which is active.
In my personal practice, I still prefer anti-VEGF as the first drug of choice. And again, only after 2 or 3 injections, and maybe even changing the type of injection as we saw here, if it still does not lead to any benefit, or if the benefit is there but the result is not lasting long enough to satisfy the patient, that is the time when I would like to introduce dexamethasone or a triamcinolone as an implant. And but at that time, I still prefer to do it as a combination, put anti-VEGF as well as the steroid.
So my take on it is that I would agree with you that anti-VEGFs would be my first choice, and steroids I would think in case of non-responsiveness, or if the patient is high risk for development of myocardial infarction, cerebrovascular accident, maybe a recent stroke, a recent heart attack, bypass, a patient who's pseudophakic or about to become pseudophakic would be choices for steroids.
Yeah, same for me. I think VEGF would be the first choice, and steroid I would add it earlier. That's all. I probably would have added it after the first or the second injection if it was not responding.
Sir, we have your
The
second
next case, yeah.
Yeah, let's take that. So second case, again, it's a little bit of a younger lady, 46-year-old lady, no systemic illnesses. So this time it's 6, 18 and 12 in the left eye. So let's see, again, we can see there's disc edema, there's dilated tortuous vessels, you have these hemorrhages, but hindsight gives us 20/20 vision. So this part is the one where I want you to make a note of. You can see retinal ischemia sort of thing. So initially we thought it could be a cilioretinary artery occlusion along with CRVO. And you can see a little bit of hard exudates like a sort of fan over here. So I want you to concentrate on these things as of now. We did the FFA. You can see this is almost the same as what we would get, except a blocked fluorescent area over here. In the late phases, if you can see a little bit of vascular leak coming out of the vessels around here. So these are subtle clues that we missed initially. We diagnosed the case as non-ischemic CRVO. We couldn't see any occlusion as such over there. And we started giving intravitreal Avastin for these patients. So after 2 injections, this looks almost the same. We couldn't get any difference. This looks the same after 2 injections. So 2 months have passed and there's no resolution of anything in this. So this is the time when we went back and reviewed and thought that no, there's something else to it. And if you look closely, you can see there is a lot of disc edema. So this disc edema does occur in CRVO initially, but maybe after a few days or a month, it starts going down. So this has not happened. So since this has not happened, we have to revisit and think of something else. So we did it. So right now we are thinking of something like neuroretinitis. So if it is neuroretinitis, we have to think of infective causes. So if it's infective causes, we did all those things. We have to rule out tuberculosis. We have to rule out toxoplasmosis and the other things. So out of this, we got the Weil-Felix test positive. So this is a sign of rickettsial infection. So once this is positive, okay, we got a good thing that we can easily treat this with doxycycline. We gave doxycycline to this patient and you can see that it has responded. This is about 15-20 days after starting doxycycline. So this is pre and this is post. So non-responding CRVOs or CRVO mimics. So there are some of these conditions which mimic CRVOs. One of them is rickettsial infection. So if we are not sure initially with our diagnosis, so we should also take up a few of these panels where we rule out infective etiology. So we need to do that. That's what I think. Any comments, Dr. Anand?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent case presentation and diagnosis. I would agree with you. The macular star was something which was unusual at the beginning. And the amount of disc edema, which was out of proportion to the level of venous occlusion and the rest of the features like hemorrhages, etc. So what all investigations do you do in a case of neuroretinitis? I mean, when you suspect? Because I don't think a lot of these tests would not be available. Like if you're trying to diagnose Toxocara or Bartonella, or
We don't have those over
yeah,
here.
I don't think
So
we have
what
any of
we
those
could
tests.
do was we ruled out tuberculosis. We have
Okay.
to rule out syphilis
Hmm.
and toxoplasmosis along with rickettsial infection. So these four we did the panel, out of which we got the wheel phoenix positive.
And did you give oral steroids as well to this patient?
We have given, yes.
Okay. So another point, actually, we forgot to, many young patients with CRVO may actually have a condition called as papillophlebitis, which is an inflammatory condition. And many of them would respond to oral steroids. So that's one thing to remember. Not in this case, but in general, I was talking about.
Gaurav, you want to add something?
I think as mentioned, the macular star which is there was the take home point in this case, that is what one should look out for, and if that is present, then remember that this may not be just plain ischemic CR or a CRVO related to the blood flow itself. There might be something else which is there, and need to investigate it better.
Sonal, you want to add something to that?
No, for me, if I would have looked at this case and at the first presentation, I think the disc edema would be one thing that would have clinched to me that this is something that I'm looking more at a different point, and more like a neuroretinitis or a viral retinitis, something like that. So at that point, yes, as we've discussed, I would have done the torch titer for these patients and gone ahead and done the toxo and the TB, which is very common in our countries, and get these tests done. But yes, these are googly cases, which you always think will present like a CRVO, and there are a lot of confusion. But such kind of disc edema, I think I would have gone ahead with the investigation and started steroids earlier, or systemic, which would probably start helping these patients. But it's quite scary at times because you don't know what their blood reports are going to come after you see this, and you don't want to start steroids initially. So the disc edema and the macular star, two things which should put a question in your mind that you are looking at something not very similar to a CRVO or a very plain CRVO presentation. Somal, you want to add anything?
Yes, I was just typing that. So Gaurav had a nice therapeutic option of injecting steroids rather than giving it
Yeah.
orally, Ozurdex
Right.
or IVTA, but only if it is a viral like herpetic or toxo, which is sometimes a differential for this condition, or ARN also for that matter. The steroid given in the eye can actually be very, very detrimental to the condition. And unfortunately, unless you do a surgery, you cannot even undo that condition. So probably if I have to give steroid, I would give it under cover of an antibiotic, or if I'm doubly sure it is not the viral or the toxo condition.
I don't think he was talking about this particular case.
Yes, yes, Anand, you are correct. Somil, I was actually responding to the previous questions.
Okay.
I am not talking about this second case.
Okay.
In this case, I don't think any of us would.
No, I
Into
also
a steroid implant. Nice case, Anand.
Somal's cases now.
So Anand, you'll have to share your screen now.
Sumita sir, did we discuss the investigations in CRVO? Because there are many general ophthalms who are attending. We might have discussed in a usual elderly patient, but suppose there is a CRVO in a young, or there are
Swapnesh, you should discuss those cases. Those investigations, you will know better.
So Anand sir is talking about a case where I had a CRVO in a young patient who turned out to have she had multi-system disorder. So she was a case of, I think she had obesity, morbid obesity, she had hypertension, she had diabetes, she had polycystic ovarian disease, she was on hormonal therapy, and she presented with bilateral CRVO. And we investigate her thoroughly for all cardiac parameters, so namely 2D echo, carotid Doppler, cardiology reference. Also, we did a Doppler study by Dr. Deepak Bhatt. We did a MRI brain, and in spite of all, so she had also deranged INR levels because she was on a warfarin therapy also. So I had a tough time managing that particular patient, and almost she has taken all permutation combinations of anti-VEGF and steroids, tried all the anti-VEGFs, and I had actually sent that patient to Anand sir for second opinion. So he always writes, continue with the same, and he rechecks if anything I've missed. So that was, I had presented that last year, I think in BOA also. So that was a good kind of a case study how a CRVO in a young patient is very difficult to manage, and she still comes with recurrent edemas, and she herself knows when her vision is going to be down. By now, she reads her own OCT also.
We have Dr. Vatsal. Vatsal sir is here if he wants to make any comment on CRV or these presentations. We can unmute him.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I was just mentioning I had a patient about 25 years back or 20 years back who had bilateral CRVO and polycythemia. His hemoglobin was 17. And I think that time there was a therapy of hemodilution also, and that patient probably responded. I don't know whether he underwent hemodilution or blood transfusion, giving blood or something. But that was an interesting, I have those photographs also, I'll have to look out. But that was an interesting patient.
I think we can go ahead with Somal's presentation.
So, am I audible? And are my slides showing?
Yes.
Yes, Somil, go ahead.
Just screen.
Yeah. So
screen
I
show.
actually Swapnesh, the case that he was discussing about, I would like to add to that case. Actually, it's a very interesting case, and it turned out to be, I think Swapnesh, it was APLA syndrome, right? If it was
Yes.
anti-phospholipid antibody syndrome.
Yes.
So my first case of BRVO is something very similar. Let's start discussing. So my first case is a case of atypical BRVO. Now, why should I be presenting atypical BRVO? Because every ophthalmologist is very familiar with a typical BRVO. So a typical BRVO, we all know that has these AV nicking changes. And because of this venous blockage at arteriovenous crossings, you have this segmental hemorrhages developing. The veins become tortuous and some of the veins get blocked, because of which we get BRVO. This is a very acute picture. And in the chronic picture that you see over here, you get these sclerosed vessels over long term, typical NV with a few collaterals, and pre-retinal hemorrhage from the neovascularization. The typical edema that you get in a BRVO is again a segmental edema where you have lower half completely not devoid of edema and the upper half having edema, which if it becomes chronic, like the case we saw previously of CRVO, they become cystic and they respond then poorly to treatment. Now my case is entirely different. There is definitely this aspect of BRVO that is here, but everyone knows that this is typically the inflammatory BRVO and not the vascular BRVO that we talk about, because there is periphlebitis and there are paravenous hemorrhages, not just confined to one single sectoral quadrant, but a little bit scattered over the entire zone of that vein. But what catches you in the eye is not this BRVO that was there bilaterally. This is again a youngish patient, female, morbidly obese. And what catches you in the eye is this cotton wool-like exudative appearance of the macula, almost giving rise to what we call as a cherry red spot. So best suited additionally to the diagnosis of BRVO that we have here, is it BRVO with CRAO, because it looked like a central retinal arterial occlusion picture, BRVO with BRAO, which is branch retinal vein, BRVO with cotton wool spots, because there were a few cotton wool spots in the periphery, and BRVO with multiple BRAO. Now, why this pathological classification is essential, I'll come to with this slide. So this typically has CRAO where you have a confluent or a coalescent appearance of the white patch that you see with a distinct cherry red spot. When you have a branch retinal artery occlusion, you see it confined only to one half. When you have only cotton wool spots, which is very typical of hypertensive and diabetic retinopathy, you have them as isolated spots all over the posterior pole. What our picture, this is our patient, had a mixture of all of this. And that is why I came to the conclusion that it's probably a multiple BRAO, because when you have a CRAO, you have the main artery block. When you have a BRAO, you have a branch artery block. When you have a hypertensive or diabetic retinopathy, you have either the capillary or the precapillary arteriole that is blocked. Our disease is essentially confined to what we call as the medium artery. And the reason why I say this, the patient turned out to have collagen vascular disease or SLE, something very similar to what Swapnesh was talking about. This is typically a medium artery disease. So it does not have only cotton wool spots like hypertensive and diabetic retinopathy, nor does it have a distinct full-blown CRAO or a BRAO picture like that you see in embolus, but a mix of the two. Now, if you do an FFA of this, I'll show you a video. You have a sudden cutoff of these vessels. So all these large vessels are filling very well, but the medium vessels suddenly go completely blocked. As against this, if you see the typical picture of a CRAO, you see that the vessels are perfused overall, but you see this cattle trucking or slowness of circulation, which is typical of a large vessel disease. And if you compare it with a small vessel disease like diabetic retinopathy, all these large and medium vessels are well filled, but what you have is typically what we call as capillary dropout areas. So yes, definitely this is an inflammatory BRVO coupled with a collagen vascular arteriolar medium vessel vasculitis, which was secondary to SLE. The patient also had a component of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome together with SLE, which resulted in that picture. Now, why is it essential in a BRVO to know what the etiology of the BRVO is? So what, as I put it, BRVO may be atypical, treatment is still very typical. And as we know that anti-VEGFs is given irrespective of what the etiology would be, at least in the first go, because anti-VEGFs can cure anything, probably except for COVID-19. Now, this is one slide that I keep presenting in a lot of my presentations. There is already an unspoken conclusion drawn when it comes to using anti-VEGFs in PRVOs, probably in even diabetics or anywhere else, that when one is in doubt, you give anti-VEGFs. If one has no doubt at all, you still give anti-VEGFs. If one is a cataract surgeon treating BRVO, you give anti-VEGFs. If one is a retina specialist treating BRVO, he will say cataract surgeons just know when to give anti-VEGFs, just don't know when to give anti-VEGFs. He would rather carefully do an FFA, OCT, OCT angio, ultra wide field, ultra high resolution OCT, and then finally give anti-VEGFs. So in this case especially, it is not a typical BRVO macular edema. What you see here is a reverse. You don't see a macular edema, you see macular ischemia. And this elevation is because of inner retinal edema of the nerve fiber layer. And in this case, definitely anti-VEGFs are not going to work. So inflammatory BRVO, the mainstay of treatment, if you see over here, like collagen vascular diseases, is primarily steroids and anticoagulants in order to prevent systemic ischemia. Like how ischemia takes place in the retina, it can take place even in the heart or the brain, resulting in a stroke or a heart attack. And that is why anticoagulants are the mainstay of treatment, unlike what you see in the other pathologies. So before I go to my case 2, do you want to have a discussion on this? Any views from the panelists?
I think an excellent case, Saumil. I mean, but if you have a bilateral presentation, which is like this, no, very typical, which is not very classic BRVO or a classic BRAO or a classic CRVO or a CRAO, I think, systemic diseases come to you as the first thing that will come in your mind, that there's something happening systemically in the body, whether it is any blood disorder or it is any kind of, you've seen a lot of times advanced, lymphomatic conditions which present like this, or leukemic retinopathies which present with multiple hemorrhages like this, and you may have a lot of cotton wool spots. So you may have. So I think probably if you see a bilateral picture like this in a patient, systemic conditions should come into your mind first and foremost.
So
instead of
when you
treating
have,
it.
Yeah. So when you have a bilateral condition like what I had shown, there are huge number of differentials like the ones that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
How exactly to arrive at a particular differential, we needed that pathological classification which I showed, whether
Yeah.
it affected a small or a
Yes.
medium or a large. Like for example, if it was a small vessel, probably the other differentials apart from hypertension and diabetes would be like Putsch's retinopathy, leukemic
Yes.
retinopathy, and things like that. So we know which caliber of the vessel is affected in order to arrive at the diagnosis. So that was one of my main messages that I wanted to convey through the case.
I would just add one more condition which can lead to, apart from collagen vascular disease, which can lead to multiple cotton wool patches in the fundus, and that's HIV retinopathy.
Yeah.
So that's another thing we should
System.
think about.
Anything, Gaurav, you want to add something to
No,
this?
Saumil, I think that's a wonderful presentation as well as a very important point that you have driven, that when it is atypical, we need to look at the vessel caliber and try and decide. Just for the benefit of everyone, can you quickly go through what all tests you would advise in which kind of atypical BRVOs?
So after doing I would like to do a full immune profile if I'm suspecting an inflammatory BRVO. Obviously, the infective pathologies like TB would definitely be there as one of the differentials. But if I have to consider an immune profile, it would be syphilis, sarcoidosis, the whole lot of torch titers, DNA, which is anti-nuclear antibody, anti-DNA, dsDNA, P-ANCA, C-ANCA, and anti-phospholipid antibodies. That would be my preliminary investigation for an immune-mediated BRVO, failing which there are a whole lot of other diseases like polyangiitis and the good pastures and things like that, which come in later. And Dr. Anand had brought out a very important point. HIV, obviously, HIV retinopathy is again a vasculitic retinopathy in nature, B cell mediated, and it often presents as just cotton wool spots in the retina, which should give that give an idea as to where we need to work him up for the same.
In these cases, Saumil, you should also keep infective etiology in mind, because there was a little bit of vasculitis which we could think of if there was patient was immunocompromised. We could think of CMV or one of those things.
Common in cases of EPLA, also history of any, if it is a female patient by
Recurrent
chance,
abortion.
recurrent abortions is
Yes.
also
Yes.
important.
Very
And
important. Yes.
And if she has any history of
Like she
any
had to.
IV injections taken for whatever reason, then they tend to have these phleboliths or vascular thrombosis at the site of injection or IV, which it's basically a deranged vascular profile that these patients have. So they can actually trigger a response in your mind that maybe we are looking at EPLA.
A very, very good point, Sapnesh. So should I proceed?
Yeah, go ahead with the next one.
So case 2, again, I'm not going with the typical BRVOs. Here I'd be concentrating on what we call as tributary, macular, or a small segment, a smaller version of a BRVO, which we call as TRVO, or tributary retinal vein occlusion. Now you see 3 cases over here. I'll be discussing each as to what we have here. You see all of these cases have a cluster of hemorrhages, intraretinal hemorrhages, along one of the vessels, as you see over here. And you see over here, you have a few fine tortuous vessels. The rest of the fundus is absolutely okay. And the macula, it just probably encroaching on the macula to give rise to a pathology. So in this, which of these is a TRVO? Is it 1 or 2 or all 3 of them? I'll probably put in an OCT in order to make the diagnosis easier. And these are the OCTs of the 3 fundus. Now, let me discuss each in detail. Now, this OCT over here shows cystoid macular edema, which is approximately in keeping with the vascular picture that we see over here. So, would this be probably a tributary vein occlusion? Probably yes. But there is a differential for this condition, which is way different from a tributary vein occlusion. Here you don't see it absolutely confined in the direction of one vessel. It is crossing the horizontal midline, which makes you think it is probably not a tributary vein occlusion, though you see a picture, OCT picture, very typical of a BRVO. So you have this condition which we call as MACTEL, type 1 macular telangiectasia, and you see the periphery here. You will see a lot of telangiectasic vessels with capillary non-perfusion areas, which is probably a variant of Coats disease in adults, which can present just as a posterior pole type 1 MACTEL kind of a pathology and may or may not have a peripheral picture like this. Going on to the next one, let's say we go with this. The OCT here shows that there is something in the choroid going on, not just in the retina, and that should give you a clue to the diagnosis, because no matter what, a branch retinal vein occlusion will never present with anything happening in the choroid. So though there is intraretinal edema with a lot of dot hemorrhages and spongy spaces over here, this is what should give away the diagnosis, which brings me to this condition, which is called a RAP lesion or a retinal angiomatosis proliferans, where you see that though you have intraretinal hemorrhages to begin with, if you do an FA or if you do an ICG, you see that there is a choroidal neovascular membrane sitting right there, and that will bring about this fluorescence. On the OCT, you will see this bumpiness of the retinal pigment epithelium with a fibrovascular PED. So coming to this condition here, when you do an OCT, it probably gives you no clue at all because the macula is absolutely flat. And this is the only fundus picture of the three that ended up with having a tributary vein occlusion, not involving the macula. It was just a small peripheral vessel with a single isolated cotton wool spot over here, and the patient was relatively asymptomatic. So I have now, before going on to case 3, should we discuss this with the panel? Anand, Dr. Anand Kumta, do you have to add anything to the 3 variants of a TRVO that we keep seeing very often?
Nothing more to add. Excellent cases, all of them.
So do you come across this as a diagnostic challenge once in a while when you see cases of TRVO, and what are the key pointers that will make you look for these entities or these differentials?
The type 1 macular telangiectasia that you presented is not very common. Type 2 is the one that we see very often. But as like your case, the edema was clearly not on one side of the horizontal.
Correct.
It was going across both the sides, and it was in the temporal location, the typical location for a type 1 macular telangiectasia. So I thought that was fairly typical, that particular case, the type 1 MACTEL that you presented. And of course, CNVM, especially RAP kind of lesions, are a differential diagnosis for macular BRVOs.
So again, here in keeping with the fact that not every case is anti-VEGF-able, if you have a type 1 MACTEL, it's not going to really respond to anti-VEGFs unless you do a focal laser or a PDT or something. On the converse, a RAP lesion would definitely respond to an anti-VEGF if you thought it was a BRVO to begin with and gave that. So again, therapeutic option to decide, you should know exactly what the differentials of a TRVO should be.
Kamil, I think the take-home message in this case should be, as you already mentioned, that look whether the lesion of edema and hemorrhage is respecting the flow of the blood in the arteriole or the artery, because if it is a TRVO or a small BRVO, then it should be limited to one of the venules, as we saw in the RAP lesions and other cases, it's not really respecting the one area alone, Also the hemorrhage which are seen are quite different than what you would typically see clustered in one significant area in cases of a TRVO.
So, Amil, a very simple take-home message for all the general ophthalmology friends here is, when you see pictures like this, and we normally see it with an indirect friends, we need to see it on a slit lamp biomicroscopy 90D. That will really help you to see the lesions very, very well in such cases. And in the RAP lesion, if you actually see the lesion well, you see a large area of a yellowish like lesion, which is below the retina. You see the blood vessels going all over it. It'll give you some clinching diagnosis that there is something happening behind the retina also. Probably you are not looking only at that small hemorrhage that is there, giving you a small clue that this may be a small BRVO or a TRVO. There's something that's going on behind. Obviously, OCT will clinch the diagnosis, but clinically also, it can help you that there is something that is going on, which is not a classic BRVO kind of a picture. So a slit lamp biomicroscopy will also be very helpful to such cases where you'll be able to see the hemorrhages which are crossing the midline in MACTEL1, or you'll see a classic TRVO in some cases, or in a RAP lesion, you will see this picture behind. If you see your fundus image.
Sonal madam, I'll add peripheral fundus examination as well as
Yes.
looking in the other eye.
Other eye, yes.
And do the OCT before committing yourself to any diagnosis.
Yeah.
For RAP, Somil, classic OCT, I remember the three things, which is retinal hemorrhage, intraretinal cystic spaces, along next to the PED. And in this case, that is actually a pipette,
Vertically domed.
a flat, irregular PED. So that should alert you. These 3 points together that you have to look out for that. Nice.
Thanks. Should I go on with my?
Yes, Somil, go ahead with your next.
So this is the last series of cases, and I feel very tempted to include something surgical, even if it's a purely medical, out and out medical topic. And so here it comes. So I have this BRVO OCT where you have a little bit of an edema, which is not nearly boggy or cystic, so to say, not the kind that would really respond to anti-VEGFs like the one that you see over here. And there is definitely a taut membrane covering it, which is probably responsible for elevating this retina and causing traction. So for this kind of a BRVO, I'll be showing the surgical video. Surgery is a very, very good option because it not only reduces the retinal thickening, but also this very taut hyaloid or an ERM that is there on the top of the retina, like a white glistening sheath, it gives them a lot of relief in terms of vision. You see this video over here, you see this white sheet over the retina, and this is a classical vasculitic BRVO which has this inflammatory ERM covering the central portion of the retina. And very carefully with a 23 gauge needle, you need to dissect it rather than performing a routine PVD, taking care to see that the macula is not taken off. The direction of pulling the vitreous should always be towards the site of vascular attachments over here. And all these vascular attachments, after removing the vitreous, should be slowly trimmed to their bases so as to not cause iatrogenic retinal breaks. So that this is one take-home message, that you need to sometimes perform surgery in BRVO. This is a second case scenario where you don't have macular edema. So anti-VEGFs definitely are not going to help. In fact, they're going to worsen this condition, and everything around the macula is going to threaten this macula sometimes to get detached, because you see this cystic schisis-like spaces here. Here there is subretinal fluid, the macula is on the verge of getting detached, and it's probably because of this traction. If I have to show you the video of this, this is distinct fibrovascular frond that I have detached from the disc. I am scared to detach it from this main vessel over here because I feel it has a broad attachment that you see. Secondly, I feel it is very vascular, it is going to give way and it is going to give rise to uncontrolled bleeding. So I was a little bit skeptical of removing this in toto. I have lasered the peripheral retina here, like what you would do in a BRVO. So what I've done in this is, instead of removing this broad-based attachment and its potential traction exerting effect on the fovea, I have peeled the ILM around the fovea and sort of disconnected its traction from this broad-based attachment. So here the fovea would probably fall into place and not get detached in the future, because and I have kept the attachment as it is without trimming it and incurring a possible complication of bleed or an iatrogenic tear. So the last one is an iatrogenic, not iatrogenic, a BRVO induced macular hole brought about probably by the traction of the fibrovascular fronds. And here I'm showing the surgery where I'm removing the traction. You see this multiple sclerose vessels over here with very taut attached fibrous fronds. I'm segmenting them so as to isolate them and trim them near the base. What remains is a macular hole in a slightly detached retina. So I stain it with brilliant blue, and then I do the ILM peeling in this detached retina, because that is going to actually remove the invisible tangential traction of the ILM, the second membrane as well, and will probably go a long way in closing this macular hole. So these were 3 surgical cases that I thought would be an indication in BRVO cases. I would now like to discuss with the panel with regards to as to how as to give management tips with regards to these conditions. So any of the Anands we can, I mean, probably start off with, and then go to Gaurav and Sonal.
I think all the surgical cases were absolutely brilliantly handled. And so surgery would be indicated for thick epiretinal membranes, fractional detachment of the macula secondary to a BRVO, vitreomacular traction.
So this what I feel is this particular surgical indication BRVO is way distinct from CRVO, where we don't usually find this kind of a pathology. Because CRVO does not typically give rise to NVD or NVEs. It typically gives rise to what we call as NVI, NV, and NVG because of the watershed region being in the periphery. Because BRVO has this central NVE going on, there is a fibrous component, and that causes a lot of ERMs to happen in BRVOs as against central retinal vein occlusion.
CRVOs can also sometimes lead to proliferative vascular retinopathies, but it's less common than NVI and NVG.
And Somil, as you had shown in your cases, more often than not in BRVO, when you have fibrovascular membranes or fibrous proliferations, they will be very near the macula, and the macula will always be at a risk, as you showed in the last case of a macular hole. So that risk is always there, whether that macular hole is occurring per se by the pathology, or as you hinted out during the surgery, you have to be extremely careful, or else you will induce it during the surgery. So as you showed in the first case, the direction in which you start your peel and in which direction you go would also be important, so as to prevent least amount of traction on any of the areas of thick adhesion, abnormal adhesion, which we will have in these cases.
So, Dr. Sonal, that those points with what Gaurav mentions, I feel they are the perfect take-home messages that I try to convey with my videos. Sonal, you have anything to add to this?
No, absolutely beautifully handled cases, Somil, and excellent presentations. And I'm sure vitrectomy, yes, has a larger role to play in BRVO cases because of their presentations. But one thing that I've also seen is in these cases where you have these tractional fibrous membranes, they're more of these eccentric kind of ERMs. You know, they come at one particular, arcade. So they're more difficult to peel. So as a result, yes, you have to be more careful because you don't want to cause more iatrogenic problems over there when you're peeling that membrane, not like a simple ERM that you would do in a ERM surgery. So yes, care has to be taken, but very well handled, very well presented.
So one common link that I wanted to establish in all the 3 case scenarios, that anti-VEGFs are not the only modality of choice. In fact, they would work detrimental in these surgery cases, because if you have just the fibrous component going on, trying to solve the edema issue by giving anti-VEGF is only going to worsen the traction and will probably convert just a traction into a detachment and a detachment into a hole.
Amel, one question, as you showed in your cases, compared to diabetic retinopathy where the pegs are very small, and invariably when we remove the fibrous proliferation, we are able to even mechanically pull it apart, or even if we trim it, it's one single point. In BRVO, invariably it is thick, broad-based, as you showed in your case, and hence it becomes a typical challenge. Have you noticed this in each and every case of surgical BRVO case?
Specifically in inflammatory BRVOs of the young, like secondary to Eales disease. Fortunately, those are the kinds that are more in the periphery than in the center. But yes, a definite take-home message, BRVO ERMs are way worse than most of the other vascular ERM conditions. So Swapnesh, can we go on to the
Yes.
cases that are to be discussed by the panelists?
Yes. I mean, only about the prognosis in a VRVO related ERM is always poorer than a idiopathic ERM. This is for the general ophthalmologist, because we have to take into account the vascular damage which the primary disease has already given to the patient. We are trying to mechanically make the retina straight.
So in retina, we normally don't talk about vision and prognosis and
Yeah.
top picture and things like that. So but it's good that you mentioned that.
Kumta sir,
Yeah.
can we go on to the X-Files?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen.
In the meanwhile, Dr. Vatsal Parekh, sir, sir, do you want to add anything to this?
I was just wondering, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
I was just wondering, probably I would have trimmed that membrane little more, or I would have tried bimanual surgery, and that would have been able to get rid of that membrane below the disc, probably. Otherwise, I think you did an excellent job.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So I don't have a formal case presentation, but what I have is a few slides. Some of them are probably repetitive, so I'll skip them. I just wanted, this was mainly for the entry segment surgeons as well as the PG students, to see some differentials. So this is a 45-year-old male patient, non-diabetic, with this kind of a fundus picture with gradual.
Anand, we cannot see
I
your
cannot
screen
see your
as yet.
screen.
Can you
Yeah.
share your screen?
I cannot see your screen.
So
You'll have to go to share screen and
Yeah.
then click on the.
At the bottom, a green colored button.
So is it seen now?
No,
No.
not yet.
Okay. I shared the screen, but I don't know for some reason.
You have it on your desktop, the presentation?
The laptop.
Yeah, when you press the share screen, you have to press again on the. We can see it now.
Is this come now?
Yes, now.
Okay, so I just have a rapid kind of spot diagnosis kind of thing. So this is a 45-year-old male patient with gradual DV, both eyes, and non-diabetic. So any of you could give me the differentials for a condition like this, or mainly for the anti-segment surgeons and the PGs. So
I think they can write it in the chat, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, they should.
So I don't know whether I can get the chat here. So I can't see the chat for some reason, but this was actually a grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy with disc edema and a lot of AV changes, arterial attenuation, a lot of hemorrhages and exudates, and macular star that you can see here. So hypertensive retinopathy is not something that we should forget. This is a 55-year-old hypertensive with sudden inferior visual field loss. So any,
Yeah.
So this is another patient on routine fundus examination, no visual complaints, recent loss of weight, and non-hypertensive and non-diabetic.
HIV related.
Yeah, so this was actually a patient of HIV.
Just got to
Another patient, any
CMV retinitis.
CMV retinitis.
Yeah, I mean this was like a active
Prostate
vasculitis
branch.
with multiple inflammatory BRVs. I don't think it was CMV. I don't think it was CMV.
Okay.
This was a CMV.
Yeah, this was a CMV.
Actually. It was like a prostate branch angiitis.
Branch angiitis, yes.
So what about this case? This patient has hemorrhage at 3 levels actually. It's sub-RP,
Sub-RP.
as well as
Macroaneurysm or trauma.
It was a macroaneurysm.
Macroaneurysm.
Yeah. This patient underwent an anti-VEGF and a laser to the macroaneurysm and did well. It's already been covered.
Yeah.
So what about this?
Cilioretinal sparing.
CRAO with spared cilioretinal artery.
Spared cilioretinal artery.
So this is a patient with no PL vision. What would you think of? Looks like a CRAO, but there's no perception of light as well. So, and you don't see a cherry red macula here. This is actually an ophthalmic artery occlusion. So, what about this?
A CRVO
CRVO with
retinal
CRAO.
artery occlusion.
Ciliary.
retinal artery.
What about this patient with unilateral, lot of exudation and
This looks like Oates disease.
Oh, yeah.
what about this? This is actually
A branch
that Somil had presented. It's the old macular BRV. You can see
BRVO, yeah, old macular
chronic
branch.
macular with,
You can see the sclerosed vessel there.
So this is my last slide actually. This is not related to this, but I was so impressed by the fundus that I thought that I should share it here. So 15-year-old girl who had diminished vision at night, and this was the fundus image. And
How come you don't have the Optos pictures?
no, this was much before that. This patient was before I got the Optos data now. I just wanted you to comment on the fundus and tell me if you find anything. I was really impressed with this fundus. It has nothing to do with the BRVO thing, but
CSNB.
huh?
Was it CSNB?
CSNB, but there's something in the fundus. So it's the golden metallic shield actually.
Shield, yeah. On the left eye, you can make out.
It's the only case of Oguchi's that I have seen, so I was dying to share it with everyone. So that concludes
Interesting.
my presentation.
We should give it to Prajakta Chaudhary. She's picked up Uguchi's.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. She's already written Uguchi's there.
Yeah, very, very good, Prajakta. So you want to go with your cases, Sonal and Gaurav?
Gaurav, you want to go first?
Okay, I will go first. Let me. Okay. Share. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So just so the first case is of a 40-year-old lady who complained of right eye diminished vision since 10 days. There was no systemic history, and there was profound visual impairment in the right eye. Left eye was 6/6. Anterior segment was normal, and when we looked at the fundus in the right eye, we could see that the arterioles seem to be sclerosed, but at the same time, we could see that the background in the macula is not really healthy. We could find multiple hypopigmented areas and something like a cherry red spot coming in. In the periphery, we could actually see Roth spots. It's not really visible on the fundus photograph here, but we could see the spots of hemorrhages with possible yellow center. We looked at the other eye was normal. And when we did the fundus fluorescein angiography also, on the right eye, this is the arteriovenous phase, and it showed a normal fluorescence, and left eye also showed a normal fluorescence. But right eye, as we know, had visual acuity dropping down to finger counting. When we did the optical coherence tomography, we could see that there is some amount of minimal parafoveal thickening which is present, but not very significant. When we investigated the patient, hemoglobin was reduced to 7.9, ESR was raised, serum homocysteine was moderately raised, but the major parameters which we were looking for in terms of diabetes and blood pressure were normal. coagulation profile, Doppler, 2D echo of the heart, everything others investigations turned out to be normal. So the stark glaring thing for us was the hemoglobin. And when we advised anemia profile, actually the second time when we ordered, the hemoglobin came to only 5.6 grams per dl. And hence we labeled this as anemic retinopathy. For the increased serum homocysteine, we advise the patient to take homocheck and then refer the patient to a physician for anemia management. We lost the patient for 2 months, but at the end of 2 months, the patient came back with a vision of 6.6. Previously, the patient was finger counting, and this time the patient's hemoglobin had increased to 10.7. So this is the right eye picture at presentation, wherein we can see the sclerosed or stenosed vessels, arterioles, as well as the multiple hypopigmented areas in the macula along with a cherry red spot. And we can see that all those lesions have cleared out. It looks like a normal fundus. Just ignore the artifact over here. And in 2 months, the vision improved from finger counting to 6.6 just by correction of the anemia. And the change in the OCT was what was initially a mild thickening has now become a mild thinning or atrophy in the parafoveal area. But as we saw, the vision has become 6.6. I'll jump to the second case and have the discussion later, because this again is a similar presentation. But this is a 78-year-old gentleman who had right eye decreased vision more than left eye since 3 months. Positive history of ischemic heart disease for 12 years. Again, right eye had profound visual impairment versus mild visual impairment in the left eye. Patient was pseudophakic in both eyes, but again in the fundus photo, we could see, again it's not documented in the fundus photo here, but we could see rot spots in the periphery in the right eye. Optical coherence tomography showed atrophy of the retina. And to our surprise, even here, the patient came back with decreased hemoglobin, though in this case it was not as profoundly less as in the previous case, but all the other parameters on the anemia profile were also reduced. The serum homocysteine was almost normal, and the diabetic control was good. Patient did not have any systemic hypertension. When we referred this patient to the physician, again, he started the patient on iron for anemia. And he found that on repeat CBC, there was lymphocytosis, and decided to give the patient albendazole 400 milligram as well, along with that. This patient returned back after 3 months. And again, he had a significant improvement from finger counting to 624 with a good improvement in his parameters for the anemia profile. So when we look at rot spots, we have typically been taught that rot spots means SABE, subacute bacterial endocarditis. But in the differential diagnosis of rot spots, we should also look out for leukemias and anemias. And in cases of severe anemia, the ocular manifestation can range from retinal hemorrhages, which can be unilateral or bilateral, subhyaloid or vitreous hemorrhage, a CRVO-like picture, optic disc edema, cotton wool spots, macular edema. So it can involve the small blood vessels, also leading to ischemia and neovascularization and its other manifestations. What is important to remember here, that in cases such as aplastic anemia, which can be a life-threatening hematological disorder, sometimes the initial presentation of the patient can be to an ophthalmologist before other systemic symptoms have even developed. So remember, especially in Indian scenario, anemia should be kept as a differential diagnosis when we are looking at the small caliber blood vessel occlusion. Coming back to these two cases, what would be the role of elevated serum homocysteine in the first case versus anemia? I have no clue. Is the decreased vision due to anemia only at the level of retina, or is anemia and small vessel closure occurring also at the level of the visual cortex or anywhere else? And is that also leading to the profound visual impairment? Because if we look at the fundus, it doesn't really appear neither on angiography, nor on OCT, nor on fundus examination. We see a severe, profound pathology which can correlate with a finger counting vision. And in the first case, the hemoglobin level was pretty less compared to the second case. So what is the threshold of anemia for reversible and irreversible blindness, or at what level would anemia start really causing a decrease in vision? These are, I think, the questions which I would open up to the panel. Dr. Anand Subramaniam is smiling, so I think I will let him take the questions first.
Gaurav, these are all very good study questions. We should do a study and find out the answers for these questions.
I'm sure you have the answers to them, so probably you can show that the next slide and.
No, I really don't have the answers to all these things, but I know Anand will now make us do all these studies at virtually, so I'm prepared now mentally.
I want to make a comment.
Thank you, Anand. Yes, Dr. Kumta.
Yeah, the first case, can you go back to the OCT of the first case of anemic retinopathy?
Okay.
The one which had less vision in the right eye.
Yeah, you want, we have both the before
the
treatment and the after the treatment. I'll go to the, this is after the treatment, and yes, this is before the treatment.
So is this the right eye? I think if you look at the inner layers, you can see the kind of appearance that you get in arterial occlusions.
Yes.
What we call as PAMM, I think, the middle maculopathy, where you have, like, when you get some infarction, like you get a similar picture in CRAO, but it's not like a full-blown picture like what you get in CRAO, but because of the hypoxia, there is definitely some degree of ischemic damage to the inner retina. So that's the only thing that I would see, and that in my opinion, would be the cause of less vision in this patient.
I agree, and typically they will, when they heal, that area which is edematous will become atrophic, which is what you are seeing here.
Correct. There would be
but what is surprising is the 6/6 vision from finger counting.
6/6 vision would not be a normal 6/6. It would be with some defects and maybe loss of contrast sensitivity and little less brightness and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, now Dr. Anand Kumta is talking like the patients who after cataract surgery still complain after 6/6 vision. Yeah, Sonal, if there is no more, I think you can show your cases. We are short of time.
Till Sonal Madam loads her cases, Anand sir told about PAM, I guess.
Yeah.
So Octa is a, did he mention about Octa?
No.
So there was a discussion that Octa is a very good tool to diagnose PAM, and it is again reclassified into whether it is deep capillary plexus or intermediate capillary plexus. And with the newer Octa machines, you can actually reduce the noise which used to be seen in the middle capillary plexus. So at a recent webinar, Dr. Munna Bende showed a similar case where it was a case of CRVO. And even after treating the macular edema and treating all the possible treatments were tried, and still the patient's vision was not corresponding to the amount of macular edema or the CRVO damage which was seen. And then she did an Octa, and she came to a diagnosis of PAM, where it was present in the intermediate or the middle capillary plexus. So just wanted to put that point that Octa is a good tool to diagnose PAM in cases of retinal vein occlusions.
Wow.
Yeah, Sonal Madam.
Should I? Yeah. So this is a very simple case. This is a 35-year-old female who came with diminished vision for distance and near in her right eye. The history was quite acute. She complained only for the last 2 or 3 days that she was finding blurring of her vision. Rest ocular history was nil, systemic history was nil. She didn't give any history of any medications or anything that she was taking. Right eye vision was 618, left 69, intraocular pressure was fine. If you see the fundus examination, this was the right eye and the left eye. So the right eye classically showed tortuous vessels. You see a small area of you think probably this is a small area of ischemia that is there on the retina, dilated vessels on the optic nerve. There is an evidence of some kind of a macular edema. And this is in the left eye, which was posterior pole, did not show anything. I went ahead and did the peripheral retinal examination, and there were multiple small hemorrhagic areas in entire periphery with some areas of small cotton wool spots. And there was some kind of a retinal, small areas of looping or, beating of the vessels that you can see right here where my arrow is pointing. This was the left eye, and the left eye, though the posterior pole did not show anything, the periphery showed very, very fine dot hemorrhages. There was one that was right here, and there was one that is right here. It's not maybe seen very clearly, but just about few dot hemorrhages in the left eye. We did a fundus fluorescein angiography. The perfusion was absolutely fine. There was no areas of non-perfusion that were seen. There was no other the leakage or anything. There was mild extravasation of the dye from the inflamed vessels. You could classically see these small looping kind of like an anastomosis kind of a thing that was seen in the periphery in the right eye. The left eye FFA was absolutely normal. And in the late picture, there was like diffuse leakage from the dye from the optic disc and at the fovea. This was the right eye OCT, which showed a large amount of intraretinal edema with a subfoveal serous fluid. And this was the left eye OCT. At this point, I would probably stop and ask the panel that what do they think about this case. Right and left, both eyes, young women. This is the right OCT, this is the left OCT. And this is the fundus picture of both the eyes. Gaurav, Saumil, anything, Anand?
How was the blood pressure?
Yeah, so you've clinched it right there. So actually, if you see the picture on at that point in the right eye, you probably think this may be an impending CRVO, like a venous stasis retinopathy, the earlier stage of a early CRVO presentation. But because I could see some hemorrhages in the left eye, we did the blood pressure of this lady. We took the blood pressure at that point only, and the blood pressure was 180 by 110. And we just put her on hypertensive management. And in exactly from 9th September, just in 3 days, with proper BP control, this was just in 3 days, the macular edema had settled down. The eye was looking fine. Her vision had slightly improved to 612. This was about 10 days later. Fovea is absolutely flat. Everything on the retina is quietened down, and that was the end of the case. So a very simple case. Looks like when you see the OCT image, you probably would think that this is like an impending CRVO, and you would probably want to go ahead and give an anti-VEGF. But if you look at the other eye and you see fine hemorrhages, and you please think about taking the blood pressure of that patient and doing basic baseline systemic investigations. Probably you can get away with just treating the patient systemically and not doing anything for the eye.
Sonal, can you go back to the left eye fundus photo?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So one more additional point to clinch would be the what you notice at the AV junction. Both
Yes.
in the normal eye, looking at the arteriolar attenuation as well as the AV crossing changes.
Yes.
What we typically learn as the Keith-Wagner-Barker classification.
Yes.
And that would
AV nicking.
point out.
Yes.
Saumil, what exact points helped you clinch the diagnosis?
So I feel this looked like what we call a pseudo Foster Kennedy syndrome, where you have minimal dyspallor in one eye, the seemingly normal looking eye, vis-a-vis a full-blown clinical picture of a macular malignant hypertension. So what I feel that this eye may be following, the left eye may be following the right
eye, yes.
or may have resolved and gone to the other side in terms of resolution. So it's just that there is a difference in the speed of evolution of the disease in both the eyes. But essentially, this would be a bilateral condition. So
Yes.
you should approximately have a symmetrical picture. But what should give we should give importance to the fact that you have this temporal pallor in the disc and those AV crossing changes. Though I can't see the periphery over here to be able to comment on the hemorrhages, she showed the peripheral photographs where you have that typical water hemorrhages. So
yeah, can I make a comment?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the right eye at presentation to me looks like a uh, like an like a CRVO.
Here.
And, it's probably a recurrent CRVO because I can see collaterals on the disc,
Disc,
which I would
yes.
not expect to develop in 2-3 days of her symptoms. So I think the collaterals on the disc remain even after the edema has gone. So I think there is a component of venous stasis also. I agree with whatever you had said, but I think there is a component of CRVO in this patient. I don't know what the others panelists feel about it.
So,
So again, the same, we had a
Think about the
discussion.
collaterals on the disc.
yes,
Disc edema and what is going around the disc is way out of proportion as compared
portion
to
two.
remaining CRVO changes that you see. So
Correct.
there is definitely a component of venous stasis, but primarily there's something in terms of papillitis that is going on here.
Do you
that-
think that collaterals can would stay? I mean, can they come up in a
No,
few?
no,
No,
not so soon for sure.
definitely. When I, in fact, actually, when
Yeah.
we saw the patient first, in fact, Anand, as you rightly mentioned, we thought that this is like like a venous stasis, because the disc collaterals were absolutely confusing, and at that point. But I think the other eye showed these fine arteriolar changes and these dot hemorrhages, and
A lot of
probably,
hypertensive changes for sure.
yeah, and probably I think the advantage that we had was that she was a staff working with us, okay, and she presented immediately in I think 2 days because her vision was slightly getting blurred in the right eye. It was 6:18 at this point, so at that point, obviously, the presentation was earlier. Maybe as Soumil would have said that if left eye was following the path, she would have presented with a full-blown picture in both the eyes of a malignant hypertension or a classic hypertensive retinopathy,
Yeah, so
with probably the right eye going ahead.
So had it not been for these excessively tortuous vessels over here, my diagnosis of choice would have been AION in this case. If
In
you
the
just
right eye?
see this picture, especially in the left eye, given the right eye would not have had the kind of tortuosity and dilatation it has,
Yeah, the
that
left
would
eye.
be my diagnosis of choice for this condition.
Yeah, I agree, Soumil. Typically, as you said, the asymmetrical disease is there. Left eye vision is also better. So the atrophy in that eye seems to be misguiding, because atrophy, if we are attributing it to hypertensive retinopathy, then it would mean that the patient would have had a history of the similar problem in the left eye, vision decrease and other things.
It could be. That would explain the collaterals as well.
Yeah, but the vision is better in the left eye. Being a staff nurse, there is no history. So
there's no history. So then
so
the surprising fact was that
he has undergone some amount of AION.
there was no systemic history, no ocular history. So I think if the left eye was doing good with her vision, probably she's not picked up the right eye changes, and they would have been there for a while, because I didn't. For me, the history of 2 or 3 days was a little surprising. That's it. With this kind of a picture, because all the findings on the disc, the collaterals on the disc would not come up in 2 or 3 days. That's exactly what was there. But then it just resolved completely with controlling her blood pressure, and we didn't have to give her any injection or anything or treat her in any other way.
I think Dr. Vatsal Parikh possibly has mentioned, I don't know, it's who is Galaxy Note 8, but I think it's him, that blood pressure should be checked in all patients with vascular retinal disease, and I think that is possibly a message which we all should stand for, that in any cases of vascular disease, at least in Indian scenario, the first thing which we always look as is blood pressure as well as diabetes.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a simple case to put up.
So any comments from Vatsal Parikh sir with regards to this?
No, I think at Shankar Nethralaya, they are checking blood pressure for all. Can you hear me, Soumil?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yeah, I think at Shankar Nethralaya, they're checking blood pressure of all patients. That may be a simple test to do also, I think. Like all these vascular retinopathies, maybe one can do screening regularly, because anyway, patients are waiting, So that was one idea. And Sonal, I think the last photograph you showed, after the patient's blood pressure came back to normal and vision became normal, were they collaterals? I don't think there were collaterals in the last photograph. what you
No,
saw
so-
on the first photograph before when you
Some-
diagnosed blood pressure?
Hmm.
What
I've not had
Anand
a
said,
long follow-up. My actually follow-up was the last photograph that I showed was only 10 days, sir. I'll just
but I
show
think
it.
those vesicles had already become small, I think. Can you just show that photograph?
Yes, I'll see. I'll show you. Am I not able to?
Sonal, you will have to use the arrow on the bottom left corner.
Yeah, I'll just go back to that case. Not able to.
Bottom left corner.
Laptop, just go behind, go back.
Yeah, I'm actually going back only, but I can't.
Previous screen.
Not the slide is not.
Go escape
Hmm.
and
Nothing's happening. I don't know why.
Yeah, bottom left. Can you see?
Yeah,
Press
I know.
it.
Okay, got it now. It's not going through.
so those collaterals are still there.
Yeah, they are
This
still
was
there.
that, but this was only from 10 days from the presentation, from 9
Okay.
September to 19th. I don't have a follow-up
Later
after
photograph.
that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last I think I saw was on 25th September, and that time also the collaterals were there only, sir. So
Okay.
that was
Okay. Very nice.
I think Swapnesh,
So-
we've been good on time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
but we need to
and we have nothing else to speak.
No, we need to end soon because now the PGs are logging in.
Yeah.
I am holding them in the waiting room again.
No. I think we'll log out now.
Yeah, we'll
It
log
was
out.
really nice presentations.
It was
Yeah.
excellent moderated
Excellent
by all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Swapnesh. Thanks, BOA.
Thank you.
But
Thank
I
you,
think
BOA.
we
Thank you,
still
Preetam.
missed Pritam over here.
Yes. We chose a wrong date today. We didn't realize Preetam would be locked in. But anyways, happy birthday to Himalini.
So thank you all moderators and the speakers. I think it was a wonderful presentation. Simple as well as very complicated cases of retinal vein occlusions, and a lot of take-home messages for even the retina surgeons who have walked in, and obviously the general ophthalmologists. Thank you, everybody. I'll be quick in my closing remarks because I really have to log in for the PG session again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swapnesh.
Swapnesh. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.